Well, hello everybody, how are you doing this fine day? I hope you're enjoying your week. Welcome to another survival challenge, more specifically, an Oz survival challenge. I think that I've spent quite enough time talking about all these fantasy series and horror series and sci-fi series and magic and superpowers and all that other bullshit. Sometimes you just want to talk about regular people thrown into a universe with just them and their own personalities and physical ability to see how they would do in an interesting situation without all the over-the-top superpowers and fantasy bullshit. And that is what we are here to do today. Now, as usual, if you don't know anything about Oz, you gotta go check out part 1 where I actually go into detail about what our challengers might have to face when they go into Oz. You've already seen all those videos and, you know, don't fucking worry about it. It's fine. And if you enjoy the video, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, share, and join the membership. If you join the membership, you will get videos early. But I'm wasting enough of your time. Let's get started. First up on the chopping block, we have Dexter Morgan from the Land Before Time series. A long time ago when Dexter was a little child boy, he had a mother who was a crack whore. And despite that, she was actually a good mother for all you fucking judgmental bitches out there. But due to her attachment with drugs and also, for some reason, the fucking Mexican cartel, she was approached by the police with an opportunity to become a CI. CI refers to a cunnilingus instigator, for those who aren't quite as savvy as me on the terminology. And this goes really well for her for about 8 seconds. She, along with a bunch of other people, are eventually picked up by the cartel, including her 2 sons, and are locked in a shipping container where a bunch of cartel dudes come in with chainsaws and then start sawing everyone to death with chainsaws. The only people who are left alive is Dexter and his brother Brian, who had to witness the whole thing in front of them and then are just left in the shipping container for 2 days, stuck with the sawed up corpses of his mother and a bunch of other random people. After that, the police officer that was in charge of Dexter's mother's whole CI thing felt really bad and responsible for the death of this kid's mother and what happened to him, so he adopted the child into his own family and did the responsible thing by getting him the appropriate help that he needed to overcome this massive amount of trauma that he was feeling. No, I'm kidding. What is he, a pussy? No, he just buried that shit deep inside and forgot about it and ignored it for his entire life until he eventually grew up to be a serial killer. But he wasn't just any normal serial killer who just like killed animals and shit. I mean, he did kill animals and shit, and his dad kind of ignores it for the most part for some reason. But his adopted father did try to guide him in the right direction. And because of that guidance, Dexter grew up to try his best to be a decent person. However, he's still like a serial killer at heart. So what he ends up doing is he becomes a sort of, it's not a police officer. He was a forensic specialist or a blood splatter specialist that worked for the Miami Metro Police Department. I don't know if that would consider him a cop, but it's like, it's cop adjacent. He helps capture criminals. So I feel like it's close enough to a cop, you know? But despite being adjacent to a law enforcement officer, he still had this deep compulsion to murder people, but he didn't want to murder good people, so he decided to direct that murderous instinct upon the people who are criminals, who he was chasing. So that's what he did. So he became like a serial killer, but like a serial killer vigilante who was doing his serial killing not necessarily because he's a vigilante, but because he just really wants to kill people. And that is the most basic summary of the beloved Land Before Time children's series. It's really great. Show your kids. I don't know if Dexter Morgan is my most recommended character to put in Oz Survival Challenge, but he's definitely up there, like top 3 for sure. And I've avoided doing him mainly because he's gonna be super fucking boring. So I'm gonna touch on Dexter Morgan here, but I'm also gonna touch on any sort of police officer type character, because people have also asked me to put a lot of corrupt cops from shows and movies in here as well. The reason why it's gonna be so boring is because the moment any police officer is put in Emerald City, which is the section of Oz that the challenge takes place in, they are immediately executed for being police officers. All the criminals unanimously decide to kill this person in as brutally and viciously a way as they can. This is the case 100% of the time, with no exceptions. In fact, it is so common these police officers are brutally murdered by the prison population that they have their own separate wing in the prison where only law enforcement officers who have committed crimes can go, and they are kept away and protected from the rest of the population because they will be killed immediately. So for Dexter Dexter Morgan and other characters like, say, the main character of S.H.I.E.L.D. and all these other sort of corrupt police type characters, it's gonna be the same situation. Either one, they're put in Emerald City and they're murdered immediately, or two, they're put in the police officer wing where they're locked away from everyone else and nothing happens there. It's just like 5 dudes who chill out and play chess all day. There's really no interesting stories that can be done here. Not with police officer characters. And I don't really see a way around that. The only thing I could think of is if they took a police officer and made him go undercover and join the prison to basically reveal some sort of deeper, darker secret within the prison. I can see something like that happen maybe, but not with Dexter Morgan's character. He's just a blood specialist and a serial killer. Why would he be chosen to go undercover? There's 1,000 different police officers that you can choose to do that are actual investigators and police officers that have training that allows them to go undercover. Morgan doesn't have that training. So yeah, this is a pretty short and uneventful section, but Dexter's either dead or he's just boring. Those are your options. And if you want to argue that Dexter's not actually a police officer, he's just a blood splatter specialist and they wouldn't kill him. If me, an alleged non-criminal, still considers him a police officer, I guarantee you these psychopaths and murderers that were dumb enough to be caught will absolutely consider him a fucking cop. And that will not make a damn bit of difference. The point is, it's his job to help the police go and catch people. Also, he's a vigilante. And if he's arrested for being a vigilante, it's the same shit. He's known for murdering criminals brutally. He's not gonna have a good time in this prison. Next up on the list, we have Big Stan from How Not to Die from Autoerotic Asphyxiation Part 2. So Big Stan was an insanely rich, like, real estate guy or something, and he was eventually arrested and went to prison for, like, fraud or something. And I know I don't sound particularly confident about my explanation of this whole backstory, but that's mainly because none of it matters for the movie at all. The movie is about not getting raped in prison. That's not a joke. That's literally what the movie's about. So when Big Stan gets arrested, he's found guilty, and he has to serve 3 years in prison. He gets so terrified of this because he ends up talking to some random guy in a bar about what prison is like, and all he tells him is a bunch of stories about how people get raped in prison. This freaks Big Stan the fuck out, and he decides to do something about it by learning how to fight. And then he finds this random homeless dude, played by David Carradine, to train him in the art of combat so that he can survive when he's sent to prison and not get raped. And David Carradine agrees, teaching him the thing that he is the second best at, martial arts. First being, obviously, autoerotic asphyxiation. And if any of you guys think that it's kind of fucked up or cold-hearted of me to make fun of a dead man about the way he died, my answer to that would be, if you don't want to get made fun of for your death, make sure your death isn't fucking hilarious. If you're going to die really sad or really badass. Don't die funny, because if it's funny, it's gonna get made fun of. If Martin Luther King died from choking during a blowjob, that is all any of us would be talking about of his character to this day. Doesn't matter what else he's accomplished in his life. Not nearly as important as that goofy ass death. After a couple of months of being trained by David Carradine, he eventually has to leave his smoking hot wife, who is way out of his league, and go to prison for 3 years. When he gets there, he basically beats up everybody in the prison and kind of forces them all to get along. Like, he stops all the rape in the prison, he stops all the gang warring in the prison, because everyone is just so fucking terrified that he's gonna beat the living shit out of them. And he essentially turns this extremely brutal, rape-obsessed prison into like a no-rape zone. I'm not making this up. This isn't a joke. This is what the movie's about. Somebody wrote this movie and gave it to Rob Schneider to direct. Also, fun fact, you can find this whole fucking movie on YouTube for free. I don't know why, but it is. It's on there, it's free, you can go watch it. Go fucking watch it if you don't believe me.
Stan?
I'm gonna get raped. So the question then becomes, how would Big Stan do if he is sent to Oz and has to stay in Emerald City? He would do so fucking poorly. So even if we take the movie as is literally, where Big Stan can take on any number of people, doesn't matter how many, he could kick the living shit out of them, nobody can face him in a fight and win. That is what the movie of Big Stan sort of clearly shows as the movie goes on. Even if that were the case in Oz, that doesn't mean he's gonna survive. Most people who die in Oz do not die through fist fights or stabbings. They die because people sort of stealthily kind of get people killed in really weird and interesting ways. The prisoners of Oz are very creative when it comes to their ways of killing people. A character kills the head of the Italian mob by putting crushed up glass in his food for weeks until he eventually has like hemorrhaging and internal bleeding that he didn't notice. And he starts throwing up blood and dies. They don't know what it was that killed him until it's too late. Big Stan's horribly inaccurate roundhouse kicks are not going to save him from fucking internal hemorrhaging. In episode 1 of Oz, they introduced the main character of some guy whose name I don't remember because he doesn't live past the first episode. And they make it very clear that this guy is the physically most powerful character in the entire prison. There's no one in the prison that could fight him on par. He's the muscle of the prison. He's unbelievably aggressive and threatening towards everyone that he comes across. And despite having the backing of an entire gang within the prison, it still ends with him being thrown in solitary and burned alive from inside the fucking cell. Because as the episode went on, he just kept pissing everybody in the prison off. If people want you dead in Oz, you're gonna die unless you kill them first. When Big Stan in his own movie goes to prison, the first thing he does is he goes and beats up the biggest, strongest dude because he wants to show the whole prison that he's the toughest dude there. After he beats them up, the entire black gang attacks him at the same time. He beats all of them up, and then the neo-Nazis try to ask him to join their gang, and then he beats them up for even asking him. He basically just keeps starting shit with literally everyone who comes in contact with him until the whole prison is terrified of him. The prison of Oz is not going to be terrified of Stan because he beats them up. Big Stan is a comedy. Oz is not. Although, it is funny in kind of a sick, twisted sort of way.
Give me some tits! Give me some fucking tits!
But if he just goes around starting fights with everyone just to prove how tough he is, all that's going to do is put him in the target of everybody there, and they're going to kill him in any number of fucked up ways. Now, this might sound like I'm conflicting with what I said about Boyka in a past video, because Boyka's whole thing is that he's insanely skilled at fighting and no one can beat him. So why is it that he could survive a very long time and Big Stan couldn't? Simple. Boyka doesn't want problems with anybody. Boyka loves fighting. It's his favorite thing to do. But he doesn't go out of his way to cause massive fear and horror upon everybody in the prison. He just likes fighting. For the most part, he keeps to himself and doesn't cause problems with anybody else. Boyka has been in prison for almost as much of his life as he's been out of prison. He knows how this shit works. Big Stan is going to prison for the first time in his like mid-40s, and he thinks he can just beat everybody in a fight and everything will be cool. It's dumb. It won't be cool. He'll be killed almost as soon as Dexter will, probably in the first or second day. Big Stan is in for a rude awakening if he thinks that the only thing that Oz can do to him is walk up and fight him. Next up, we have Kingpin from the Daredevil Netflix series. And yes, I need to be specific, the Netflix series. I am not talking about any of the Disney Plus shit, because he takes a grenade to the face in those shows. In the Netflix series, he's more or less like a normal dude, so that's the version of him we're gonna go with. So a long time ago, when Kingpin, also known as Wilson Fisk, was a little child boy, he had an abusive father who beat him and his mom, and he killed his father with a hammer, and that's it. Then he became a crime boss. We don't get anything else for his backstory. Yeah, so I might annoy some people with this entry, but I know everyone and their mother thinks that this is just the greatest villain in all of Marvel outside of like Thanos, who's also shitty, and I guess Killmonger, and maybe a little bit of Kilgrave. Anyway, doesn't matter. I think that Vincent D'Onofrio plays the role really, really well, but Kingpin, as far as his writing goes, he's not that great. Like, he's fine. He's okay. A lot of the decisions he makes and the things he does doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. I don't understand his motivations at all. Like, I don't get what he's trying to do. So in season 1, he keeps reiterating over and over and over again that he wants to save the city from itself. Okay, cool. We don't know what happened to make him want to save the city. I don't know how having an abusive father made him come to that conclusion that he had to save the city. That Murdoch becoming Daredevil makes sense because his dad was killed by organized crime. But Kingpin, I'm not so sure about. And then he grows up, becomes super rich, and becomes a crime boss. Neither of which do we know how it happened. We don't see it, he just is. And then he spends the whole first season burning down buildings, killing innocent people, working with the Russian Italian mob and the Hand, which is like a group of evil fantasy ninjas. And I just don't know how he intends to save the city this way. How is importing a bunch of drugs in the city saving the city? Like, I don't get what he's doing here. And then at the end of season 1, when Daredevil beats him, he directly states that the city doesn't deserve to be saved because it beat him and it arrested him despite the fact that he's killed tons of innocent people at this point. Which, yeah, obviously they fucking arrested him. What's he mad about? And he says that now he doesn't believe that it should be saved anymore, but he believes that it should just burn and it sucks and whatever. And then in season 3, when he comes back, he's just straight up evil psychopath and just wants to cause as much damage, basically like a mob boss terrorist, just doing all sorts of horrible shit, just because. And we also don't know why he's doing any of that either. Like, I get that he no longer wants to save the city at the end of season 1, but that doesn't mean he had to do a whole 180 and now he wants to do the exact opposite, where he just wants to make the city as bad as he possibly can. Like, what is he thinking? What does he want? I don't get it. Also, his skills and abilities don't make sense. Again, Daredevil's make sense, right? He got into the accident, and the accident gave him all kinds of really heightened senses. And then, with those heightened senses also being blind, he was then trained by a guy named Stick in martial arts and how to hone those senses, so he basically became like a ninja dude. We know where his skills came from. How is it possible that Kingpin could fight on par with Daredevil? Because the only reason the show seems to give is because he can do it in the comic books. But in the comic books, he's a master at martial arts, so it makes sense. And he's a superhuman who can physically fight against Spider-Man. In the show, he's just a dude with no superpowers, and he just is capable of fighting Daredevil despite the fact that he's never had any martial arts training as far as we're aware of. So how is he capable of fighting against this dude? We've seen Daredevil fight against like 20 guys at the same time. I don't understand how Fisk could possibly be his equal in combat. And honestly, the way the fights are choreographed, it just seems like Daredevil gets worse at fighting when he fights against Kingpin. I don't really get it. Again, I'm not gonna go as far as to say he's a terrible villain or a terrible character or anything. He's fine. He's okay. He does what he does, and he's acted really well, and that's it. I'm just saying that if people say that this is one of the greatest villains that Marvel's ever produced on film, you know, maybe Marvel needs to step up its game, like a lot, like a ton, actually. So, how would the Kingpin do if you threw him in the middle of Oz? I mean, he would do better than the last two. I mean, that's something. You see, the problem with putting a character like Kingpin into Oz is that you're taking Kingpin out of a universe where everything is very simplistic. Oz was able to become the one boss over all crime in the entire city of New York, basically just by like paying people. Once he's thrown in jail in season 2, he's able to control the entire prison with money, just by giving people money. He controlled everything. He controlled all of the guards, he controlled the warden of the prison, he controlled everyone in the prison through money. In real life and in Oz as well, things aren't that simple. You can't buy anybody off. In fact, arguably, you can't buy most people off. For instance, the prison in Daredevil that Kingpin goes to, it's the most homogenous fucking prison I've ever seen in America in my life. It's mostly white people, and there doesn't seem to be any clear indication of any sort of racial issues that happen within the prison, which again is very unusual for a prison population and is completely non-existent in a place like Oz. For instance, Wilson Fisk is a white dude. He will not be able to take control of the black gang simply because he's white. Doesn't matter how much money he has. He will not be able to take control of the Italian mob because Fisk is not Italian. Fisk is a Norwegian name, in case you weren't aware. He won't be able to take over the Aryan Brotherhood if he's not a member of the Aryan Brotherhood. He won't be able to take control of the Hispanics. He will have zero power in there. And unlike when he was in prison, where he was just able to throw money at all of his problems and figure that shit out, he won't be able to do that here. And that's mainly for two reasons. One is all the racial stuff. Like I said, most of the people in the black gang aren't going to care how much money he gives them. They're not serving a white guy. That just is what it is. If they did, the other black members of the black gang would kill him for being like a race traitor. If you're in the black gang, you can be friends and ally with white people. People might give you weird looks, but they won't kill you. But if you like straight up leave the black gang to go serve a white dude, you're dead. This is the case with every gang. The second reason is that a very large percentage of the people in this prison are lifers, which means his money won't have any value to them, you know, because they'll never be able to spend it. Now, to be fair to Fisk, he doesn't always just give people money. Like at one point, it's shown that a character joins under him as a very loyal soldier because he uses his money to basically take care of the guy's mom outside of prison. And I do think that might work on a couple of people, but it's not gonna work on that many, and it's not gonna work as well as you think. I mean, a lot of people in Oz are already rich. Whether it be the Italian mobsters or members of the cartel, there's a lot of very wealthy people in this prison. Point is that if Kingpin wants to take over the prison, he's gonna have to do it using very different means than he did in his own series. And he's never really shown to use any means of control other than throwing his money at things. And even if I use, say, Kingpin's strength as a factor, like, yeah, okay, he's good enough that he could fight Daredevil on par. Will that help him take over the prison? No, we've already established that. I gave the same thing to Big Stan. Characters are capable of killing other characters who are better at fighting them in Oz. It's very common. I'm not 100% sure that it's possible for someone to take over Oz because of just all of the different characters and factions that are all having issues with one another. Like, for instance, let's say best case scenario, Kingpin does actually get a bunch of people on his side, a bunch of random non-Italian white people join his side, people who just aren't involved with any of the gangs. He pays them off, he builds his own gang. Okay, now what? Well, he's got to take over the prison. How does he do that? The lifeblood of the prison is selling tits. Tits are their code word for heroin. Whatever gang runs the tits distribution, they're the gang that's in control. Normally speaking, all the gangs have different territories of where they could sell their tits at within the prison. If anyone oversteps that, you have a gang war. If Kingpin tries to take that for himself within the prison, he's going to start gang wars. And if you start a gang war in Oz, you're gonna die. And honestly, while Kingpin is shown to be smart, I don't think he's smart enough to not start a gang war, because he's shown to openly discuss that he wants to go to war with people in his own show. In season 2, he takes over half the prison, and the guy who runs the other half of the prison is aware that he took over half the prison, and they're trying to kill each other. The only reason why they don't is because they're in different wings, and they're both heavily guarded, so they're kind of at a standstill. This is until Kingpin gets the Punisher to go and kill his rival for him. And I mean, that's fine, and I'm glad it worked out for him, but other characters in Oz would have been able to figure out ways of killing that guy without having to import a goddamn superhero into the prison for him. Kingpin is smart, he's just not that smart. You have characters in Oz with Machiavellian levels of intelligence. They can lie and manipulate to everyone around them to get everyone to be their little puppets and do whatever it is they want to do. And Kingpin just isn't shown to have that level of intelligence. I don't know how he came into control of things and how he got all of his money. Again, the show doesn't tell us. But as far as what we see in the show, he can't do anything he's done without that money. And that money, as far as Oz is concerned, isn't that valuable. The people who survive longest in Oz are the people who are useful to other people or are able to make themselves seem like less of a threat. Kingpin coming in there with his domineering personality and this sort of just, this is the way I want things and this is how I'm going to do it, and him lashing out like a fucking petulant child and just attacking people, which he does a lot, is just gonna make everyone in the prison see him as a pretty obvious threat. And he is going to get murdered absurdly fast. Kingpin is a character that makes everybody else kind of work on his level, and he's never been shown lowering himself to working on other people's level. He's never had to match wits with characters who are just as, if not smarter than he is. And really his biggest issue here is that he comes from a Disney show that doesn't want to touch on the nuances of how this sort of criminal underworld would actually work in real life. Like, Disney show doesn't touch on race relations for the most part, and if they do, it's really more like preaching to you that racism is bad. Oz is a very more real way of showing things, where they just show the racism and they just show all of the sort of tribal mentality as it is, and they don't care to preach whether it's good or bad. It's just there. It's just sort of a part of the culture of the show. And this is something that just straight up doesn't exist anywhere in Marvel, but it's also something that Kingpin's never had to face before. And when he does come face to face with it, I think he's gonna fucking just face plant right into it. He's gonna get overtaken by much smarter characters and characters who are just better at dealing with this kind of political bullshit than he is. Last up, but certainly not least, we have Boyd Crowder from Justified. And luckily for me, in the runtime of this video, I don't actually have to really go into any real depth of Boyd Crowder's backstory, because there's not much to talk about. Boyd Crowder grew up in a criminal family. His father was in charge of a gang that ran in the town that he lived in. His brother was a criminal. He's a criminal. He just grew up in a life of crime, so he grew up as a criminal. In terms of what he wants in motivation, he just wants more. He wants more money, more power, more everything, and he's a selfish enough character to do pretty much anything he wants to do in order to acquire it. Now, you might be thinking me not bashing this character for having a super simplistic story without me demanding that he needs to have some sort of explanation for why he's doing the things he's doing, much like I did for Kingpin, is sort of weird and inconsistent, but it's really not, because his motivation is simple. Kingpin has a very complicated motivation. He's a criminal mastermind who owns all of the crime in all of New York City, who also wants to build a perfect utopia within that city, despite the fact that he's causing a lot of the problems that he's claiming to trying to like be fixing. It's very confusing. And with him being such a contradictory character, we need more explanation. We don't need an explanation for Crowder because we know he's a selfish person and he wants power and money. Power and money is a naturally desirable thing to want. So if you introduce a character that doesn't have any morals, you don't really have to explain why he would want to go get that shit. It's obvious. But despite being a very simple character, Boyd Crowder is also a really fucking good character. Like, no joke, if you haven't seen Justified, it's worth watching just for Raylan and Boyd and their relationship throughout the show. But each of those characters are really well written and phenomenally acted. The thing that makes Boyd Crowder so interesting is you never know anything about him. I don't mean like you don't know him. I mean, you do know him, but you never know whether he's lying or telling the truth or what his actual feelings are about any particular situation. He's constantly lying to literally everyone around him to get the things that he wants, that it sort of fools the audience and you're not always 100% sure if what he's saying to someone is a truth or a lie. For example, when Boyd Crowder's initially introduced, he is a skinhead. He's a neo-Nazi who is robbing banks with a group of other neo-Nazis. Fun fact, he was actually supposed to be a one-off villain in the first episode, but the writers and creators of the show liked the actor and the character so much they kept him around, and he ended up becoming the main villain of the entire series all the way through, all like, what, 7 seasons? Anyway, the show introduces him as a highly intelligent but still relatively simple guy who is just this racist dude who wants money and likes to rob banks. Until a couple episodes after his introduction, he betrays the neo-Nazis, basically gets most of them killed, and it's revealed that he's actually not a neo-Nazi, never was, doesn't care about race or racism at all, and was literally just posing as that so he can convince a bunch of people who he saw as dumbasses to help him rob banks. Also, he turned on all those people and basically kept all the money for himself. And he does stuff like this throughout the entirety of the show. In fact, later on, I think in season 2, he actually gets saved and becomes a Christian and starts his own ministry. And the main character, Raylan, who's known him since childhood, who knows how manipulative he is, does not believe that he's actually saved. It's eventually revealed that he wasn't lying and he actually was trying to correct his path and improve his life. It doesn't last very long and he eventually turns his back on it and goes back to a life of crime, but he was legitimately trying. And because of all the shit that happened in season 1 that you saw as an audience member, you don't believe he's really turned good either. And again, this just keeps happening season after season after season. And it makes him complex and interesting. Like, this is a man who kills his own father and clearly doesn't give a shit about the death of his brother, but then shows real feelings for his brother's widow and clearly wants to get with her and really likes her. And he goes from being kind of pervy towards her to being like really respectful and kind of a gentleman, and over the course of a couple of seasons actually wins her over. And through all of that, you don't know what parts of their relationship is real and what parts aren't. I mean, they're dating for most of the show. They almost get married at one point. And you still don't know, does Boyd actually care about her? Or does he just use her because she's useful? We never really figure it out. And even towards the end of the show, when his widow betrays him, he asks her why, and she says, I just thought to myself, what would Boyd do? Because even she doesn't 100% buy that he loves her. You can't trust anything that Boyd says or does. And the show ends damn near perfectly, where by the end, Boyd goes to prison, and Raylan goes to visit him in prison and realizes that he's back to the ministry, and he's teaching all of the people in the prison about God, and he's preaching to people and all that kind of stuff. And even then, when the show ends, you don't know if he's really gone back to serving in the ministry or if he's just using it as a manipulation tactic. Again, the show doesn't tell you. They don't make it clear. Boyd as a character is monstrously charming, unbelievably intelligent, can be extremely likable at times, all while being unbelievably evil and amoral. And a lot of times as I was watching the show, I'm not aware if even he knows how he feels in certain situations. Like, does he believe that he loves this chick who he dates for most of the show? Or is he just so corrupted down to his core that even he isn't really sure if he's capable of love or not? I don't know. Great character. Fascinating character. Almost as fascinating as how interesting it would be if we threw this motherfucker in Oz. So how would Boyd Crowder do if we threw him in Oz? He would do so well and fit like a glove in this universe. Not like an OJ glove, like, you know, a regular glove. You know that during that trial when OJ tried to put that glove on, he was wearing another pair of gloves underneath it? Like, they didn't ask him to take off the gloves he was currently wearing to put on the other gloves. That trial was a goddamn travesty. It really was. So Crowder has a lot of good shit working for his advantage when he goes to Oz. For one, like I said, he's highly intelligent and very good at manipulation. In fact, in the entirety of Oz, there might only be 2 characters-ish that are better at manipulation than he is. He's also a veteran and very skilled at both hand-to-hand combat and firearms, although the firearms won't really matter here, but the hand-to-hand combat might. He knows what to say and do to get things that he wants as he wants them. In fact, I think in a lot of ways he would be like Ryan O'Reilly. Ryan O'Reilly, in case you're not aware, he's the guy who killed the Italian mob boss by crushing up glass and putting it in his food. Ryan is an insanely skilled manipulator, easily the best manipulator in the entire show. No one even comes close. Across all seasons of the show, he has the highest body count and yet he's only actually killed 2 people himself. Because he constantly manipulates and gets people to turn on and kill each other for his own advantage. Within the prison of Oz, O'Reilly is loved by everyone and is a friend to everyone. Throughout the entire course of the show, there's only like 2 instances where characters actually figure out who Ryan O'Reilly really is, and he has them killed basically immediately, but just not him himself. Like, he gets other people to kill them. He is the only character in the whole show that can make friends with a bunch of different sworn enemies, and no one really seems to care because he's just that good at playing them off of each other. You'd think with him playing with fire throughout the whole show that this would eventually catch up with him and he would be figured out and murdered brutally at some point, but no. Ryan is one of the few characters that survives throughout the course of the whole show, despite the fact that he's one of the most aggressive murderers the show has. Every other character that tries to start shit as much as Riley does dies pretty quickly, and he's just so good at outthinking people that he survives. He gets through everything. He kills some of the most powerful people in the entire show, and no one's even aware that he did it. He's capable of framing other people for his crimes. He's capable of killing the heads of multiple gang families just through talking to people. In Oz, there is nobody that can match Ryan in terms of manipulation ability until we send Boyd Crowder there, because he's fucking close. He's not as good. Ryan's definitely better, but Boyd will give him a run for his money. And the interesting thing about it is that Boyd and Ryan O'Reilly are going to be able to see through each other's manipulations fucking instantly, because they're very similar characters. They'll see each other's strengths in each other. Like, I don't buy that Ryan is essentially looking in a mirror in Boyd and will not be able to tell that he's looking in a mirror. Same thing with Boyd. I don't believe that Boyd is going to see the manipulations that Ryan does and not be able to tell that those are manipulations, since he does all the same shit in his show. Really, the main difference between Boyd and Ryan O'Reilly is that Ryan doesn't actually want power or money. He doesn't care about either of those things. Well, kind of. He wants money sometimes, but it's not like his main goal. Ryan is a survivor. He's not a boss. He doesn't want power. He wants influence. He wants to be in the ears of every single guy in that prison so that he can get what he wants whenever he wants it. And what he wants always changes as the show goes on, because his situation always changes. One day his goal might be to become an influential figure in the tits distribution, so he'll work towards that. Another day there might be somebody who he doesn't really like that's kind of getting in his way from doing something. He's like, okay, today I'm gonna have to kill that guy. I'm gonna have to get someone to kill that person. His goals just constantly change from day to day, but his goal never becomes to acquire so much power that he becomes a main target for any of the gangs. This is very different from Boyd Crowder, who wants power, not just influence. Which means that Boyd will have to overcome a bigger challenge than Ryan did, because Boyd won't be happy with just surviving. Boyd will want control. And while he's manipulative enough to get to a certain point within the prison, I don't think he'll ever be able to control the prison outright. However, I don't think he will really want to control the prison. He does want power, but he wants real power. I don't think he'll be happy with fake bullshit power inside of a prison, because I think he's aware that that doesn't mean anything. I think he's gonna want power for when he gets out. And in that particular case, he'll probably succeed a lot. I would actually say that it would be far more likely for him to start a ministry within the prison and start getting people in to join the ministry and saving them and like building this sort of Christian religious cult, basically, but with the intentions of using those people not for the most Christian reasons. Essentially building a small army and using people's faith against them, because that is something that he has done in the past, and I can absolutely see him doing that shit again in Oz. When Boyd gets to Oz and starts to see exactly how the hierarchy of Oz works with all the different gangs and stuff, he's going to realize pretty quickly he can't take over the whole prison anyway. Like, it's just something that's not possible. He'll never be accepted as a boss of all of these different groups. And Boyd isn't stupid enough to take a leap and try to do something that's clearly not fucking possible. While it's true that he constantly strives to acquire more and more and more, he's not gonna go after something that clearly isn't possible. And one of the best traits that he has is that he's insanely patient. He's not going to take any massive risks that are going to get him killed if he doesn't know that that risk is going to pay off. So is it possible that he dominates the whole prison? No, I don't really think it's possible for anyone to dominate the whole prison. Not really. Will he have a lot of influence within the prison? Probably kill a bunch of people in power and hold a respected position, kind of like Ryan O'Reilly? Yeah, probably. He might even team up with Ryan O'Reilly, although I think that neither of them would trust each other, or that trust really applies when it comes to either of those characters, because I don't think there's anyone that Ryan O'Reilly or Boyd actually trusts in either of their... Like I said, they're very similar characters. But yeah, to summarize, I don't really think it matters how long Boyd is in prison for, whether he gets a life sentence or he's there for 5 to 10 years. Doesn't really matter. I think he'll be fine in the prison. He has all of the right skills that he needs to survive. He's manipulative, he's intelligent, he's careful, he is physically skilled and very dangerous, he's influential. He is literally everything that you need to be. So I don't see any reason why I should assume why he wouldn't do good in Oz. But that's going to be all for me. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, share, and join the membership. Remember, if you join the membership, you get videos early. Also, don't forget, every Saturday at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, we have a stream going on. Make sure to drop by then. It's open to the public. You can come into the voice chat and talk with me personally, ask me questions. We've been making tier lists pretty much every week. The next one we got this Saturday is a horror movie tier list. Come on by and you can help us build it, or you can debate me if you don't agree with something that I said in my video. And always remember, y'all stay safe out there, you hear?